Today on Alex Autos, we're out here at the NOLA Motorsports Park in Louisiana taking a look at the all-new 2015 Lexus RC F. Now, although the RC F looks like it's the coupe version of the Lexus IS sedan, and it does share most of its interior styling with that Lexus IS, it is actually a dedicated coupe model, and it's kind of a hybrid between the Lexus GS, which is their mid-size luxury sedan, the Lexus IS, which is their compact luxury sedan, and the Lexus ISC, which is the older generation Lexus convertible. Now, logically, the ISF is designed to compete with the likes of the Cadillac CTS-V, the BMW M4, Audi RS5, as well as the Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG. Now, the important thing to keep in mind in this segment is that the Cadillac CTS-V as well as the C63 AMG are fairly old products in this segment. They're actually based on the last generation platforms of their sedan counterparts. So the Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG is due for a redesign shortly. Don't know exactly when that will happen, but I do expect it soon. Same thing goes for the Cadillac CTS-V. Now, if you're looking for the video for the 2015 RC350 or the RC350 F Sport, you'll find those on my channel as well. Those are essentially the regular version of this same coupe. Now, as you'd expect from the performance model, everything up front gets a little bit bolder and a little bit bigger. We also have this functional hood vent right up here, which helps relieve some of the heat that builds up in the engine compartment, especially if you're out on a track. We still have the Nike Swoosh LED daytime running lamps right up here that were first debuted on the Lexus IS. And I think that's really the only thing that I dislike about the front end treatment on Lexus's new models is that this Nike Swoosh is divorced from the headlamp module, and that's just a little bit unusual out there in the market. Let me know what you think about it down there in the comments section down below. Now, that being said, I think this headlamp arrangement works much better with this daytime running lamp arrangement because this is not a traditionally shaped headlamp module. That was my problem initially with the Lexus IS, was that the headlamp module looked like every other car's headlamp module, but then we had this Nike Swoosh that was, separate from it. And in this vehicle, that's not going on. We have this very stylized, swoopy headlamp module that actually kind of curves right in here and then pops back out on the side. This is an all LED module. We have separate modules right over here in sort of a little triangle arrangement. Now, although the grille is very similar to the RC F Sport, it is not exactly the same. The F does get a slightly different spindle grille right up front. That's what Lexus refers to this shape as. Now, if you get the optional radar cruise control, they will put the module right there behind the Lexus logo, helping keep that look very clean. Now, because the RC platform is sort of a hybrid between the IS and the GS, the dimensions on the outside don't really follow either of those two luxury sedans. So we have a wheelbase that's a little bit shorter than the IS sedan, but an overall length that is a little bit longer than that IS. The old Lexus used to be known for very restrained, very elegant styling, and that's not the modern Lexus way. The modern Lexus way is a little bit more polarizing, a little bit more dynamic, and an awful lot more expressive, certainly. Now, in this segment, I think that the Audi and the BMWs are going for that restrained, elegant styling, and this and the Cadillac are going for very expressive styling, albeit very different styling themes. Well, obviously there's a great deal shared between the RC and the RCF. The RCF actually gets unique sheet metal in front of the front doors, and that's because we have these real cooling ducts right here. These are not for show, they actually do work. We also have this cooling duct right here on the hood, and we get an entirely different front end treatment for the RCF that improves cooling. Now, behind those rear doors, we also get some important changes in the RCF. We get this very different rear bumper right back here. We also get a spoiler that pops out automatically out of the trunk lid when you exceed a certain speed. Now, because weight is the enemy of performance, we have an optional available carbon fiber spoiler, and we also have an available optional carbon fiber roof, only in the RCF model. Now back, I have the camera at a little bit of a different angle than normal, so you can really see what's going on in terms of the style. These tail lamps really stick out a great deal from the body. The body sort of goes in, then comes back out, then goes back in, and then comes back out again. This is a style that some people have said that they really dislike, but a number of people have said that they really like this style. And I think that's an important change for Lexus overall, because Lexus used to be known as the brand with somewhat bland styling, somewhat restrained styling. And I think that's a good thing for the brand, because regardless of whether you like the styling, this definitely stands out amongst the crowd. Again, we have that spoiler that pops up right over here from the trunk lid. We get these tail lamps that are all LED right back here. They sort of curve around like that. They also stick up a little bit from the back of the vehicle. The F Sport gets these stacked tail pipes on either side and this black trim treatment that's a little bit different than the standard RC. From this angle, you can also see that things are a little bit wider back here than you get with the standard RC. We have much wider tires in the back. We have 275 width tires, and we get this sort of interesting style cue right here on the back. Now, the regular RC has kind of a different treatment going on here. They have sort of a fake cooling vent, and interestingly enough, in the RCF, we don't have any cooling vents right back here, but we do get functional ones up front. The most important thing to show you, of course, in the RCF is right here under the hood. This is an all-new 5-liter V8 engine for Lexus. Now, while this shares the displacement and certain components from the outgoing ISF 5-liter V8, this is almost entirely different. Now, of course, the changes for this generation of the 5-liter V8 focus on performance, but Lexus also really focused on fuel economy, which is a little bit surprising for a performance vehicle, to be honest. This engine produces 467 horsepower and 389 pound-feet of torque. It is a naturally aspirated engine, so it is a little bit different than some of those other options out there in this segment. Lexus's dedication is obvious when you take a look at things like the titanium valves that this engine uses, but the interesting thing with this engine for me is that this is the largest engine to my knowledge in production that uses an Atkinson cycle when it wants to. You heard that right, this uses the same combustion cycle as a Toyota Prius. It does that to improve fuel economy. Now, as I've noted before, this is not a true Atkinson cycle. This is a modified auto cycle, sometimes referred to as an auto Atkinson cycle. Basically, it's a traditional engine and it delays closing the intake valves, so that way you trade fuel economy for torque. So the torque is a little bit reduced when it's operating on Atkinson cycle, but the fuel economy is greatly improved. It should be somewhat similar to a direct injection 4.2-liter V8 engine, according to Lexus. Now, the benefit to that kind of a system is that variable valve timing systems operate very, very quickly. So this can easily flip between auto and Atkinson cycle very rapidly, and the flipping between those two cycles is not as noticeable as a cylinder deactivation system like you'll find on some of the competition. The Atkinson cycle really comes into play on the highway, where this vehicle manages 25 miles per gallon, which is very, very impressive, especially when you consider that BMW is competing with this with a 3-liter turbocharged inline-6 engine, and the fuel economy is roughly similar. Speaking of fuel economy, Lexus expects this engine to come in at 16 miles per gallon city, 25 highway, with a combined rating of 19 miles per gallon. Power is sent to the rear wheels only in this model via an 8-speed automatic, so there's no all-wheel drive version of the RCF. Now, you'll also notice that this vehicle does not have a manual transmission available. I don't really find that too unusual because Mercedes, of course, doesn't give you a manual transmission in the C63 either. Lexus does, however, give you a standard limited slip rear differential. You can also get an optional torque vectoring rear differential that can send almost 100% of the power to a single wheel whenever the system decides it needs that. Front seat comfort comes in at 9 out of 10 points. We have a 10-way power adjustable driver's seat with a 3-position memory. We also get a 4-way tilt telescopic steering column that is also memory linked right over there. Now, the standard seat in this vehicle looks like it is a 5-point harness capable seat, but Lexus tells us that it was not designed with 5-point harnesses in mind. It's really just for the aesthetics. Now, the seat is also new luxe in our particular model because leather is not standard even in the RCF. That's not too unusual in the luxury industry. It is becoming more the norm than the exception. You can get leather if you so desire. One really nice touch is that even though these are new luxe covered seats, we can still get the ventilated seat option, which is something I really appreciate. Another thing that I really like about these seats is that even though we have this very aggressive bolstering on the seat bottom cushion and on the seat side cushion, we have a lot of shoulder room in this seat, so it actually flares back out right up here at shoulder level. And that's something that I'd complained about in previous versions of Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG. In previous versions, the seats were just too narrow right at the shoulder area. I'm not that big of a person, but it really felt like I was constrained in that seat, and that's not going on in this Lexus RCF. These are very, very, very comfortable seats. When it comes time to getting in the rear, the seat has a motorized memory function, so we have a manual handle to tilt the seat forward, but you can see that the car moves the front seat all the way forward there electrically. And then if I were to hop in the back seat, it would actually move it right back into position for me. So I'm going to attempt to sit right here behind myself, and then you'll see that the seat scoots right back into place, exactly like I had it before. Now, in case you're wondering if the seat encounters an obstacle like your foot or your leg, it will reverse course and move back up to the front, so it won't crush your rear seat passengers. In terms of rear seat accommodation, the rear seat accommodations are a little bit slimmer than you'll find in the Audi RS5 or the BMW M4. There's not a whole lot of room going on back here, either in the legroom or in the headroom. I actually have to cock my head to one side in order to fit in the back seat, but that's not too unusual in terms of coupes. So I'll give this 6 out of 10 points for the rear seat comfort score. This is a dedicated 4-seat vehicle, so there is no center seat belt right here in the rear. Let's take our usual spin around the interior. You'll notice in the rear that we have fixed headrests. We do not have adjustable ones in the RCF. Right up front, we have this F logo that is embossed into the new luxe trim. Again, we have a fixed headrest in our model. We also have fixed shoulder belts right there for both the front and the rear passengers. They're not height adjustable. Now again, even though these look like they would be 5-point harness capable seats, Lexus tells us they were not designed with 5-point harnesses in mind. Now, our model does have ventilated seats, and these are, again, the new luxe seats. You can see that we really have a lot of design and a lot of stitching work going right there on the seat. The doors are a combination of soft touch plastics as well as stitch material. The section that we're taking a look at right there in the center of your screen is actually Alcantara. It's a faux suede product. We get carbon fiber trim right over there instead of wood trim. We also have a little bit of storage right down there at the bottom of the door. If you think this interior looks very familiar, you're not imagining things. This is essentially the same look that you get in the current generation Lexus IS. We get a very similar dashboard profile. The center console is very similar as well. There are a lot of common parts, but there are also a lot of unique parts in this cabin. Over here on the passenger side, we have a moderately sized glove box. It's kind of a glove slot rather than a traditional bin arrangement. I wasn't able to fit an iPad in there, however. It's just a little bit too shallow. Set back into the dashboard, we have this 7-inch Lexus N-Form infotainment system. Now, our particular model has the optional navigation software, but if you don't get the nav software, then you get the same sized screen. You just don't get that nav ability, and you get a slightly different controller lower in the dashboard. Now, although this is a little bit smaller than you'll find in some of the other entries in the segment, most notably that BMW M4, it is the same size screen that you'll find in the Mercedes C63. Now, moving down the dashboard, we have 2 air vents. We have a standard analog clock right there. We have sliders for the temperature, so you can run your finger right along the slider right like that. And then we have physical buttons for pretty much everything else in this standard 2-zone climate control. Below that, we have some physical buttons for the infotainment system. We have direct access buttons to our radio, our media, track forward, backward, play, single slot optical player, power volume knob, and a tune scroll knob. Now, moving down the dashboard, this is where you will find the SD card for the built-in nav system. It is now stored on an SD microcard right there inside that little slot. We have heated and cooled seat controls for both the driver and the front passenger. We have a very traditional console shifter right there. We have a manual mode if you shift it all the way down and then flick it to the left there. Up for up, down for down. Over on this side, we have our drive mode select button, Eco, Normal, Sport, and Sport Plus modes available for the vehicle. That controls primarily the engine and the transmission functions, although a few other vehicle systems are integrated with this. We have our stability and traction control disable button right there. This operates the torque vectoring rear differential. There are several different modes. We have slalom, we have track, and then we have standard that varies the amount of torque distribution it will dynamically send across the rear axle. Right down here, we have a snow mode. Moving further down the dashboard, we find the Lexus Remote Touch Trackpad. This is very similar to what you see in modern laptops. This operates essentially the same way as the previous joystick arrangement that Lexus had, only now they're using this trackpad arrangement. We have a dedicated home, menu, and back button, and very much like Android devices, we do get feedback with this little touchpad controller right here. It will vibrate, and you do press down to enter. To the right of those, we have 2 large cup holders, and then we have a moderately sized center armrest that houses 2 USB ports, an auxiliary input, and a 12-volt power port. This is also coated in Alcantara faux suede. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Alcantara is that it can pill, especially if you're really rough on your Alcantara and you rub up against it an awful lot, so you should never scrub Alcantara like you can scrub leather or Nulux seats. Now, moving over to the driver's side, the RCF gets this unique asymmetrical instrument cluster. Now, different than the RCF Sport, which has this center bezel that sort of moves left to right, this is always fixed. This portion of the screen is an LCD, so you can see this central portion in that ring, as well as this portion on the left. That's all part of an LCD. And then we have a traditional analog gauge right over here for your speedometer. The LCD portion of this instrument cluster is controlled by this 5-way joystick button arrangement on the right side of the steering wheel. Left to right, up to down, and then the center button is the enter button. We also get a back button and a page change button right below that. Focusing in on the LCD portion of the gauge, you can see we have our exterior temperature. We also have engine oil temperature, engine coolant temperature, and our fuel level right over there in the upper left. Right over here in this area, we have a reconfigurable multi-information display. So right now we're taking a look at the trip computer. We get our usual range, fuel economy, tire pressure, gear position, that sort of thing right over there. Now, in addition, we also have these F gauges. So you can see the position of the rear wing. We can put up and down the rear wing. You can see that changes right there. We again have tire pressure readings right there, lap timer. We also have lap history, and you can see the torque distribution if you do get that torque vectoring rear axle. This is becoming a little bit more popular, but we also have a G-force meter, so you can see the G-forces left, right, braking, and acceleration right there graphically. If we move across, we do get a navigation screen right there. It would show you upcoming directions. We also have a media interface, so you can see what media channel you're on right there. You can also change your sources and select them right here on this screen. Now, if we take a look at that central tachometer right there, that does change depending on the mode that you're in. So if I move this into eco mode, you'll notice now we're in eco drive mode, and we basically just get a digital speedometer right there along with a transmission mode selection. We don't really get a tachometer in the vehicle. Now, if we move it to normal, the tachometer will come back. You'll notice at the bottom we also get some additional readouts right there. As TVD is the torque vectoring rear axle. We can change that mode independently of the drive mode. So right now we're in slalom mode for that. torque distributing axle, and then we also have a track mode, again, that changes the way the axle sends power left and right. We can also put this in sport mode, and you can see that our tachometer changes there yet again. And if we put it in Sport Plus, it changes yet again, and it also moves the engine oil temperature and engine temperature centrally there, and it reduces the size of the digital speedometer readout right over there. Moving out to the steering wheel, we have this chunky Lexus F steering wheel. We have one piece of leather that wraps all the way around the top there. It's perforated, and then a small piece of leather right down there with our F badging. Over here on this side, we have our radio controls, volume up, down, track forward, backward, mode button, dedicated phone hang up and pickup button, voice command button, and then these are those controls I showed you earlier that control that multi-information display right there in the center. The RCF gets these nice shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel. They stick up a little bit right there so you can see which one is which. We get up on the right, down on the left. Now Lexus has brought me out here to the NOLA track in Louisiana to help prove that the RCF is track-worthy. Now there's no question this is track-worthy, but it's also solidly a Lexus. This feels very composed out on the track. It's not soft or wallowy, don't get me wrong. It just feels incredibly civilized at all times out on the track. Now we're in Sport Plus mode, which does engage the automatically rev-matched engine downshifts. It's a great feature. It really makes you feel a lot more confident out on the track. In fact, I was playing with the paddle shifters earlier, and I didn't really realize that I was in drive mode, actually. I thought that I was downshifting the vehicle, and the vehicle was actually shifting exactly when I wanted it to. It wasn't until I looked down and the little indicator didn't say manual, it said D6, that I realized that I wasn't actually doing the shifting. The automatic rev-matched downshifts are that good. Now out on the track, this definitely doesn't feel like a Cadillac CTS-V. The CTS-V is much more raw, much more of a hardcore performance vehicle. It will also, of course, bruise your kidneys out on the track, and you won't do that in the RCF. One of the best things about the RCF, however, is the engine note. This thing has an incredibly good sounding 5-liter V8. Of course, that's what you'd expect from Lexus because Lexus does love naturally aspirated engines, and even something like the Lexus LS has an incredibly good engine note. And I know that sounds a little silly because we are talking about a full-size luxury car, but it's basically the only full-size luxury car available that has a naturally aspirated V8 engine. Now, the best thing about the RCF, of course, is that I can drop it in eco mode. It feels very settled, very civilized out on the track. This is definitely the kind of vehicle you could live with every day and still take it to the track on weekends. You might want to do a tire swap or something like that, but this is an eminently livable car, which is not something I can say about all the entries in this segment. So in that respect, this RCF strikes exactly the right balance for me. I actually think that it's very similar to the Audi RS5 in that respect. The first thing you'll notice about the RCF out on the road is that the suspension is much, much firmer than in the regular RC or the RC F Sport, even if you have that dynamic suspension system and the dynamic suspension system is in its hardest mode. Now when it comes to steering feel, it's important to keep in mind this vehicle does have electric power steering, pretty much like every luxury performance vehicle out there. And as a result, the steering feel definitely is a little bit numb. There's not a whole lot of feedback coming back from the front tires for you, but the steering is nicely weighted. It's also very, very accurate. Now I haven't had a chance to 0 to 60 test this myself, so I'm just gonna have to go off Lexus's number. I'll pop it right down there at the bottom of your screen. This is very competitive with the rest of the luxury entries. Now which vehicle is right for you really depends on your driving style and your preferences. If you're after precision and finesse, that's probably going to be the BMW M4. That M4 has a slightly better weight balance in this vehicle because it uses a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. Now in terms of balancing luxury, performance, handling, etc., I think that the Lexus and the BMW are the best balanced entries in this segment. It's not too hardcore, it's not too soft either. Now Audi's RS5 is kind of a unique entry in this segment because it is, of course, all-wheel drive. So if you live anywhere where there's inclement weather or if you just value all-wheel drive, then that is by far going to be the better option for you. All-wheel drive does take a little bit of a toll when it comes to the handling, though. It doesn't feel quite as crisp. That Audi all-wheel drive system does hang that engine out in front of the front axle, but its weight balance actually isn't much worse than this RC F. And the reason is because this is a big V8 engine and it is fairly heavy, so it does cause a similar weight balance to that Audi RS5. Now, unless Lexus adds some additional features between now and the launch date, this vehicle won't have quite as many high-end luxury features as you can find in the competition. So we don't have things like lane keeping assistance systems in this vehicle. We don't have a heads-up display like you'll find in some of the competition either. We do have a blind spot warning system, and we have a pre-collision warning system available with the radar cruise control system. Now, of course, that decision isn't too surprising because the take rate on those systems with the competition isn't terribly high, so it's not really that big of a problem for the average shopper. Now let's talk about this transmission. This 8-speed automatic transmission was designed initially for Lexus. It is an Aisin unit developed by Aisin and Toyota in conjunction. This generation of this transmission has lockup in 2nd through 8th gear. So that means the torque converter will completely lock up. It will feel a little bit more like a dual clutch automatic transmission. And the other nice thing is that this transmission also has a true manual mode. So you can rev this sucker up all the way to its 7,300 RPM red line, and it will just hang out there until you shift it. When this thing says manual, it is a true manual mode. Unlike most versions of Mercedes automatic transmission, this transmission will also let you Q shifts. What I mean by that is right now we're in 8th gear with the manual paddles right here, and if I click the paddle 4 times, it will drop down to 4th gear whenever it can. I can also click them 2 more and we'll go all the way down to 2nd. Now, most versions of the Mercedes automatic are a little bit different than that. You cannot command gears in that fashion. You have to click once, wait till it shifts, then click another. Now the Mercedes does give you a nice little shortcut. You can just click and hold the down paddle and it will drop down to the lowest available gear. That doesn't happen in this Lexus. Pricing for the RCF will start at $62,400 and it should be available by December of the 2014 calendar year. This is a decent step above the $42,790 price of a base Lexus RC 350. However, in addition to that engine upgrade, that nearly $20,000 that separates the RC from the RCF, you get a lot more standard features in the RCF. We also get unique front and rear end treatments. We get a much stiffer chassis. They've actually made structural changes to the chassis in this vehicle, so it's not just add-on changes. We also get structural changes like the lack of that folding rear seat. We also get unique headlamps and Alcantara interior. We also get upgraded brakes that are different than you find on the RC 350 F Sport. We also have the ability to option up the carbon fiber roof as well as that torque vectoring rear differential. Now with a price tag over $62,000, this is obviously not an inexpensive vehicle. However, it actually represents decent value in this segment. Audi's RS5 starts at $70,900, which is significantly more expensive than this, and really the only feature that comes standard on that RS5 that you don't get in this is the Quattro all-wheel drive system. Now Mercedes C63 AMG is $63,000, and while the vehicle is older than this, it has a more powerful engine. That engine produces 451 horsepower and 443 pound-feet of torque. However, on the flip side, that C63 doesn't represent as good of a value because the rest of the vehicle is notably older and the feature set is not as modern or as complete as even a base RCF. Now BMW's M4 produces a little less horsepower and a little bit more torque. It'll set you back $64,200. Now the M4 is very lightweight, especially because it has that inline 6-cylinder engine up front, and that's much lighter than this 5-liter V8. As a result, the M4 has a better weight balance and it feels more balanced out on the track than the RCF. However, that BMW doesn't necessarily have a nicer interior. It shares most of its interior with the current generation BMW 3 Series, and that 3 Series interior is getting a little bit old. I'm actually a little bit surprised, but the RCF is one of the best values in this segment. It may not have the balance or poise of a BMW M4, it may not have the outright hardcore ability of the Cadillac CT-SV, but this is one of the best balanced vehicles overall. This is one of the few vehicles in this segment, like the Audi RS5, that you could drive every day very easily to work, to the racetrack, etc., and not really have too many compromises. It's just very well balanced in its on-road performance and its on-track performance. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you want to know more about the RCF, then go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen. I will have a complete review on one based on a full week driving the RCF. Now that should be coming up in about a few months, just as soon as I can get my hands on one for a complete review. In the meantime, go ahead and check out my first take on the RC 350 and the RC 350 F Sport. You'll find that on my channel. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, over at Twitter as AlexandAutos, and you can always email your questions to alex@alexandautos.com. I'll see you next week.